Welcome, bienvenue, benvenuti, benvindo, Huanying, and Bojo, everyone, to this summer edition of interviews by young citizens of the world, jeunes citoyens du monde. Young Citizens of the World is an extensive network of 9,000 teachers across 7,000 schools in 37 countries, reaching over 700,000 students. Before we begin, I would like to introduce Dr. Albert Tam, who is one of our co-founders and would like to say a few words. Dr. Tam.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, Honorable Dr. Lloyd Axworthy. Dear students, educators, and esteemed guests, welcome to today's Young Citizens of the World Forum. I'm Dr. Albert Tam, a certified public accountant and co-founder of the Young Citizens of the World, alongside with Mr. Mark Tremblay. As a proud graduate of the Sauder School of Business at the University of British Columbia and one of the global alumni ambassadors of UBC, I'm honored to be with you all here today. On behalf of the young citizens of the world, I extend my warmest regards and heartfelt gratitude for your presence at our forum. This event serves as a platform to unite students and educators from around the world who share a passion for global issues and a commitment for making a positive impact on our planet. Your participation and insights will undoubtedly enrich our event, providing our students with a deeper understanding of global affairs and empowering them to become effective change makers in their communities. We believe that your unique perspective will resonate with our diverse audience, fostering a sense of unity and shared responsibility for a better future. So we are confident that your presence will ignite a spark of inspiration among our young participants, encouraging them to think critically, encouraging meaningful dialogue, and take action on the issues that matter most to them. Your influence will leave a lasting impact on the minds and hearts of these future leaders. Once again, we express our sincere gratitude for your presence, and we eagerly anticipate an impactful and enlightening sessions. Thank you. And thank you, Honorable Dr. Lloyd Axworthy.
Thank you, Dr. Tam. So my name is Chris Ford, and I'm coming to you today from a spot special to my family, Lake of the Prairies, where the Shell River meets the Assiniboine, the exact dividing line between Treaty 2 and Treaty 4. The last time I hosted this meeting from here, it was a very special guest, Tom Jackson, who credited our guest from today with changing the course of his life, while both were at the Institute of Urban Affairs. It's amazing the influence our featured guest has had on individuals, and as you will see, the number of individuals is astounding. We feel very fortunate today to be interviewing and spend time with the Honorable Dr. Lloyd Axworthy. Originally from North Battleford, Saskatchewan, the historic town, Lloyd has played 34 seasons in the political major leagues. He got his start in the game as a bat boy for the Liberal Party, hearing Prime Minister Lester B. Pearson speak. As a starting candidate, he had a 6-2 record, finishing second in his first two elections as a rookie in '66 and then in '68, but went on a 6-0 undefeated tear, simply crushing the opposition in every election until 2000, when he retired from politics. Well, the government kind. He played in the provincial big leagues from '73, representing the Fort Rouge area of Winnipeg. In the Manitoba legislature, he then, like Wayne Gretzky, changed leagues in 1979 and became a federal member of parliament. He played many positions for the Liberal government, including Minister responsible for the status of women, Minister of Employment and Immigration, Minister of Transport, Minister of Human Resources and Development Canada, and finally, Minister of Foreign Affairs. It was in this last position that Mr. Axworthy really started to collect the hardware. In the last years of the past millennium, he was named team captain of the 1999-2000 political all-star game. That is, he was president of perhaps the most powerful organization in the world, the United Nations Security Council. He helped develop the UN policy of responsibility to protect. That is, that countries could help protect not just soldiers, but the civilians from being hurt from conflict. And in 1999, Mr. Axworthy was in the running for MVP Humanitarian, as he was nominated to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. And what did he do to get that nod? Well, he did so by working to achieve a ban on landmine use, greatly helping to make the world a safer and better place. He also played important roles in establishing the International Criminal Court and the protocols on child soldiers. Obviously, Manitoba and Canada are proud of his achievements, as he earned the Order of Manitoba and Companion of the Order of Manitoba and the Companion of Order of Canada, Canada's highest honor, and perhaps some of our listeners here might achieve that honor someday. Having played the game so well for so long, it's no surprise that he became a builder and became the president of the University of Manitoba, and was further honored when in 2010 he was made an honorary member of the Saugeen First Nation in Manitoba and was given an Ojibwe name, Wakashki Pinesi Inini, which translates to White Thunderbird Man. In 2012, he was granted the title of Pipe Carrier by local First Nations. So as you can see, the Honorable Dr. Lloyd Axworthy has had quite a career. And I would like to add one more of his feats that pertains to our organization, is being a part of Apathy is Boring, the Council on Youth Electoral Engagement. It sounds to me incredibly unboring, and I hope our conversation today will be most engaging for all. We are also honored to have with us our wonderful and longtime supporter, Senator Tony Loffreda. Senator Loffreda will deliver some welcoming words on the significance of this interview in inspiring youth and fostering global awareness. And on that topic, Senator Loffreda, I believe you were holding out a little bit on us back in May when we met with Mr. Dinis, as you did not inform us of a little reward you had received in Italy based on your deeds in fostering global harmony. You were appointed to be an officer of the Order of La Stella d'Italia, the Star of Italy. So we here at Young Citizens of the World are proud of you, Senator, and we would like to hear a few opening words from you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And welcome to Dr. Axworthy and Filipe, which we're friends now, Filipe Dinis. And it's great to have good people. But I also want to congratulate Marc-André Tremblay and yourself because the young citizens of the world are the beacons of hope and innovation and inspiring their peers, transforming our education system. Their curiosity, creativity, relentless pursuit of knowledge not only drive progress, but also set a shining example for future generations. And what you do here is admirable, bringing in Dr. Axworthy, Filipe that's with us, great interviews all the time. And you embrace potential, nurture their talents, and build a brighter, more inclusive and forward-thinking global community for our youth. So thank you for doing that. And I don't say it enough. It's the first time I do say it. So Marc-André, I know all the efforts he puts in, and I know how much time this takes and how much commitment, and it's heartening to have such esteemed individuals that you always reach out to, like Filipe Dinis and Dr. Lloyd Axworthy with us today, and whose dedication and leadership continue to make significant impacts. I think you've introduced them well. I won't go on with that, but congratulations once again to Marc-André and his team for the unwavering commitment, contributions, which serve a testament to the power of perseverance and dedication. So thank you for always putting this together. For me, it's an honor and a privilege to be here, an honor to serve. And I think Dr. Axworthy is a great example to follow and to follow in his footsteps with all the years he's had. Hopefully one day I can reach and all he has attained and accomplished. So thank you for being here, Dr. Axworthy, and thank you, Filipe, for being here with us again today.
Thank you, Senator Loffreda. And indeed, we do have our recently made friend, super banker Filipe Dinis, Chief Operating Officer of the Bank of Canada. Benvindo da volta. Welcome back. You have joined us today to highlight the importance of global education and leadership.
Well, Chris, thank you very much. Thank you, Senator. And good morning, everyone. It's a true pleasure to join you today after being interviewed myself just a few months ago. It was a true privilege. Today, I have the honor of saying a few words about a very special and very respected person to you, young Canadians and young citizens of the world everywhere. I still remember Dr. Axworthy as a very, very influential Minister of Foreign Affairs, but I want to focus my introductory remarks on his current role as chair of the World Refugee and Migration Council. According to the United Nations, there are over 100 million people that have been displaced from their homes due to conflict and other reasons. One statistic that I was not aware, and I'm not sure if you're aware, is that fact that about 50% of those, or 50 million of those individuals, are children under the age of 18. That's a stark, quite a statistic. In his role as chair of the World Refugee and Migration Council, Dr. Axworthy leads a strategic organization that works to explore ways that the international community can better respond to the various refugee situations. But this is not the only important role that Dr. Axworthy has been involved with and is involved with now. He has made a difference in many other areas of importance, both here in Canada and internationally. And with that, we're very excited and looking forward to hear more about Dr. Axworthy's contributions to the world and making the world a much better place for all of us. So thank you, Chris. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Filipe, for this sobering information, but also inspiring words. And for setting the tone for this interview. We're very blessed to have the support of these individuals, both with your presence and your words. And now, let the questioning begin. Question numéro 1 vient de professeur Cynthia Texera et Joaquin en Caroline du Sud, qui est, juste pour vous laisser savoir, le 8e État de se joindre à l'Union en 1798. Question number 1 comes from Cynthia Texera and Joaquin in South Carolina, that, by the way, in 1788, was the 8th state to join the 13 in the Union. Madame Texera.
Oui, bonjour, c'est nous. So my name is Cynthia Texera, as you mentioned. I am a French immersion teacher in Rock Hill, South Carolina. And since it's summertime, but summer's soon ending, my son Joaquin and I will be asking question number 1. So first en français and then après en anglais. Okay. Dr. Axworthy, pouvez-vous nous parler de votre jeunesse et des principales influences qui vous ont motivé à faire carrière dans la fonction publique et la diplomatie? En anglais. English. Oops.
Dr. Axworthy, can you tell us about your early life and the key influences that motivated you to pursue a career in public service and diplomacy?
Okay. Merci beaucoup pour votre question. J'espère d'être une réponse efficace pour vous et pour tous les autres. That's about as far as I go. My wife, who's bilingual Canadian, says that every time I speak French, it hurts her ears. So I try to desist from that. And let me just say before I answer what is a very kind of critical question is just to pay my respects to all of you who are involved in this enterprise of young citizens of the world. I think it's really exciting to be able to link and network so many young men and women around the world, in effect, because we're at a time where those linkages and those connections are being challenged and oftentimes being severed. So the fact that we provide an alternative to the kind of efforts underway to sort of retreat inside one's borders, to retreat inside one's own nationalism is a very serious problem. Okay, so where did I begin? As Marc-Antoine Tremblay knows, I just finished writing a book, a memoir about, and in doing that, I had to go back and sort of do some discovery about myself. And the one thing that really struck home is that for the first 6 years of my life, I lived in a war situation. My father, late 1939, when I was born, came to see me. The family story is that he took one look and didn't come back for 6 years. But he served for 6 years in World War II, along with a million other Canadian forces. So I grew up, and psychologists tell you that the first 6 years of your life have a very dominant influence on your thinking, your values, who you are. And so I lived in a situation where we were at war. We were fighting the Nazis and the other authoritarians from Japan. And we didn't suffer nearly the same kind of severity as millions of other children in war-torn areas who were being murdered or killed or raped. But we still had the ongoing sort of feeling. There was always a cloud in the air that we were at war. And I had my father and 4 uncles who all served in various parts of the armed forces. I had a mother and 2 aunts who were working on war work. And so we were very conscious of it. And I'll just say that it certainly has given me a perspective about how war itself is one of the most diabolic sort of human exercises. It's been around ever since humans been on the earth, but it's various times we've tried to put restraints on it, put limits on it. World War II, as some of us who left remaining, had a casualty rate of hundreds of millions of people. And it took a lot of effort to forestall it, to combat it. One of the things that I drew out of that, and I should say that just as a small anecdote, I will never forget being in my grandparents' apartment in Winnipeg, where I grew up, and I remember my grandfather always saying that he fears the day when the telegram comes, and I never quite understood what that meant until a day a telegram came that reported that one of my uncles, a very young 19-year-old, had been flying in the Sterling bombers over Europe and was shot down and killed. And it provided a huge impact on our family by realizing that, my goodness, somebody who 6 months earlier had taken myself and my cousin, played games with us, put us on his shoulders, was now sort of lying in a grave in Europe, having fought for what he believed was a defense of democracy and other things. So war is a very important part of who I am, and it certainly has instructed so much of my feelings about it. The second thing I would mention is growing up in the north end of Winnipeg, which is most of might know is a prairie city in the middle of Canada, a very diverse city, and I grew up in a community with very diverse backgrounds. Eastern Europeans, French, English, Canadians. It was really a sort of an entrepot for immigration. And I benefited from that. You know, one of the things about, I think we're missing today, if I have to make a comment, everywhere I go, when I look around, I see young people doing this. This is kind of universal. But what it means is that you're missing the value of human exchange, of sharing ideas, of having people you hang out with and talk to and kibitz with and play sports with. And one of the things that I had a huge benefit from, my family was church going. We belonged to the United Church of Canada, which is a Protestant church, strongly influenced by the concept of a social gospel, that your faith has to be expressed by the good works you do on earth. I played sports. I played football and baseball. I was involved in a number of community organizations. I also was in a community where my first girlfriend, mother, was the best maker of holubchim pierogi, which is a great European dishes, Ukrainian dishes. So I learned about the opportunity of diversity. I learned about what it is to accommodate, to realize that your particular little identity is not God-given, it's something that to be shared. And one of the great benefits, I think, of being a Canadian is that I grew up in a country in which that tolerance was recognized, that we formed the country through accommodation. Indigenous people, French, English who first came, the Indigenous people then so we kind of sideswiped and left out of our Constitution. But nevertheless, we have a founding base of saying, I'll tell you what was a turning point in my life. I'm skipping over a lot of history, but when I was in high school, age 17, we had a history teacher named Mr. Phillips. He was a tough teacher, but very strong on making sure that we as students learned, and we weren't simply putting in time. And one day he announced that our class was going to have to go downtown to the civic auditorium to listen to a politician talk. And we were all groaning and moaning about why are we doing this, until he announced that if we didn't do it, we'd lose 20% of our marks. So we became cooperative. That was a turning point in my life because the politician was Mike Pearson, who was the foreign affairs minister of Canada at the time. He had just won the Nobel Peace Prize for helping to resolve a major conflict in Suez in 1956. And Mike Pearson, who was not a Hollywood image, he didn't have a casting couch. He was a little sort of roly-poly with a polka dot bow tie. But he started talking about what it meant to be a Canadian and how we had a responsibility. It wasn't a sinecure. It's not something that we could simply take for granted. We had to put back. We had to be interested. We had to invest in the country. We had to make sure that the institutions that we inherited, a free parliament, the ability to speak our mind, the degree of equality, some decent social programs, those things were always under threat. There's always people in every country who want to turn the clock back or go back to an authoritarian system. And listening to Mike Pearson, I walked out of that speech realizing what it meant to be a Canadian, or what it meant to be a liberal Canadian, or I believed in the basic rules of law and the set of standards that we had as a country. And then also a feeling that, hey, maybe being a politician is not such a bad idea. And that kind of whetted my appetite. And so from that point on, it became sort of step by step. I became an apprentice, learning the political craft. I was fortunate enough, after doing my undergraduate work, to go to Princeton University in the States. This is in the 1960s, where I got a PhD, but I was involved in the civil rights movement. I was in the march in Montgomery in Alabama. I got involved in protests in the Vietnam War. And I began to understand just how young people could make a change by protesting, by making their voices heard, by organizing, by uniting. And if there's one message that came out of my growing up period, it's that young people make a difference. And when they decide that they're frustrated or no longer have faith or trust in who's governing or who's running things, then there is an opportunity for them to make a major change. And so that was really my beginning, a feeling that not only did I have a responsibility to be involved in helping to ensure the world was a safer, more equitable place, but I also had a training. I learned about the political craft, and it led to my first involvement in politics when I got elected to the provincial legislature. So I know that's a long answer. I'm sorry for that, but it took me a while to grow up. So there's what I can tell you.
Wow, merci beaucoup. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
A pretty terrific journey was begun, and I love that by doing these interviews we can share the paths that are possible for young kids. So thank you for sharing that with us. Question number 2 will be asked by teacher Vero Lopez and 2 great kids, Omar and Isabella, from École La Pommeraye in the London of Ontario, one of our 4 founding provinces, don't you know? Omar and Isabella.
Hello, bonjour. You are
Hello.
welcome for your work on the human security agenda during your tenure as Minister of Foreign Affairs. Could you share some of the key achievements and challenges you faced in promoting human security globally?
Sure. I became Foreign Affairs Minister in early January of '96, so I had close to 5 years as Foreign Minister. At that time, the world was a very sort of different place. The Berlin Wall had crashed. What we used to call the Cold War, which was a rigid competition between the Soviet Union and Western countries led by the United States. But everything had been sort of divided. There was virtual sort of a breakdown of any bridging or bonding. But in beginning in 1989, 1990, that the Soviet Union began to come apart. And the famous turning point in history was the Berlin Wall came down. The Berlin Wall had been built by the Soviets in Germany to keep them inside the satellite system and to keep Westerners out. It was a classic metaphor for the Cold War of a huge, rigid division. Walls usually do divide people rather than bring people together. So the wall came down, and all of a sudden, everybody was talking about a chance to do something different, to reorganize and rethink who we were and what we wanted to do. And one of the things that when I was foreign minister, I called together a number of people from my ministry, of officials, some of my political staff, some academic people, and said, "Hey, with this new atmosphere of openness and exploration and discovery, what should we as Canadians do?" Well, one of the officials said, "Let's look back what the United Nations printed in '84. It's called the Human Security Agenda, and it meant that while national security, which is what governments and countries usually talk about, military, hard security, that we also have to talk about human security, which is the protection of people, not the protection of governments or countries, but the protection of people, individuals." And they put out that people can be terribly hurt and impacted, killed by wars and conflict, by natural disasters, by starvation, by famines. And we took a look at that and said, well, maybe we'll put at the center of our foreign policy, the foreign policy of my country, will be human security, the protection of people. So that was the basic sort of core idea, that human security should be parallel and connected to national security. not one over the other, but two of them working in tandem, working together. And let me tell you what probably was the launch that really set the human security agenda for the next 4 or 5 years. At the time I became foreign minister, there was a strong movement in different parts of the world about the horrendous impact of landmines. I can show you one. I keep one in my office here, just as a reminder of just how nasty they are. Would you like to see it? Let me get it for you. This has been defagged, but can you see that? That would be put in the ground. And when somebody would step on it, it would blow up, and each of these little nodules would rip into somebody's stomach or tear their legs off. It was one of the most horrible weapons in the world. And it was a major part of every military arsenal around the world. Landmines were deep, deep killers. In 1996, when we started looking at it, some 25 to 30,000 people a year were killed, 100,000 were wounded or maimed, and most of them were women and children. Because the thing about landmines, they just aren't a problem during a war. They hang around, they're still in the ground. And we're still picking up landmines that were planted 60 years ago in World War II. So landmines became a horrendous threat, a risk to individuals, particularly to vulnerable people. You know, I remember being in Nicaragua during the Civil War, observing and seeing a group of young boys, 16, 17 years old, who were sitting there carving out their own prosthetics, their own feet out of wood, because they had stepped on landmines. They had lost their legs and feet because they were going to get water for the village that they lived in. They were trying to find food. So all those kinds of innocent people were being horribly destroyed. And so there was a movement, and it actually became sort of a lot of individuals, private citizens became involved, the Red Cross, and there was an international movement. And so the proposition was put to governments. So what are you going to do about it? And the negotiations started, but they weren't going anywhere. The big military countries, what we call in the United Nations, the P5, Russia, the United States, Great Britain, France, China, they didn't want to give up the landmines. They wanted to keep them inside their arsenals. But there was a lot of other countries, including Canada, which that said, "Wait a minute, these are just too destructive. You can't allow these landmines to continue." Anyway, to make a story short, it was a stalemate. On the one side were a large number of people around the world, young people around the world, victims of landmines who were protesting on the streets. There was a number of governments who felt that there had to be a ban on landmines, but a lot of the big, strong military powers were opposed. So in 1996, we decided to bring together a number of the countries and the individuals and the groups that were negotiating about landmines to Canada for a meeting to say, how do we break the stalemate? How do we make sure that we actually get some progress going? Well, the discussions that went on were the same. There was just two sides, and they were opposed, and there was just no progress. So near the end of the meeting came, as the foreign minister and the chair of the conference, I was going to have to make a final speech. And so I met with my staff, my sort of advisors, and we discussed, what should we say? What can we do? And here's the idea. We said, look, we're going to break the stalemate. We're going to, at the end of this meeting, I'm going to announce that Canada will host a meeting for all the governments and countries of the world to come in 1 year's time to sign a treaty that would ban the use of landmines. Well, there was a great rush of sort of support from the civil groups and civil societies and the NGOs and others. the big players thought I was crazy. But we decided to go ahead anyway. And then, again, to give you a very short answer, what I did as a foreign minister, I unleashed the entire diplomatic corps of my country. We knocked on every door around the world. We made the case about how landmines weren't even an effective military instrument because soldiers were killed as much by the landmines they planted as the individual citizens. So here is a real statement for you as young people. Because of the pressure that was there, and we were able, a year later, to invite people to come back to Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada, and say, sign a landmine treaty. And nobody thought it would ever happen, but 122 countries came and signed a treaty banning landmines. And that became registered in the UN. Now we have close to 170 countries who ban landmines. And even the United States, which didn't sign the treaty, I was a very close friend of Madeleine Albright, who was the Secretary of State for the United States at the time. And she said, we all favor the idea of a treaty, but the Defense Department, the Pentagon, is against it. And so we can't, President Clinton at the time couldn't come to a solution. But she said, if you get the treaty, we'll make sure that we sort of behave according to all the rules of the treaty. And the United States has done that up until recently under the previous president, Mr. Trump, sort of walked away from that commitment. But Mr. Biden, came back. So Americans still play a major role. But right now, let me give you an example of a direct impact. We have estimated that since 1997, when the treaty was signed, about 250,000 lives have been saved, mainly young children, young people, and women, who were the most at risk and most vulnerable. So there was an example of how through political action, through commitment to make something happen, to having a good idea, we were able to bring about something that has huge benefit to the rest of the world.
Thank
Does
you.
that give you an answer?
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, you're welcome.
We can move on to the next question. Whoever is next, go ahead.
Yeah, that would be us. So I'll introduce us since Chris is offline here. So my name is Clive here. I'm the principal at Cloverdale Catholic School here in Surrey, British Columbia. And we have a student leadership team of 20 students. Of course, we're on summer holiday right now. So the only student I could get was my own daughter here, Bella, who served the leadership team. And Bella has the next question for you, Dr. Axworthy.
My name is Bella, and I'm a student from Cloverdale Catholic School. My question for you is, as the former president of the University of Winnipeg, you have contributed significantly to education, especially for Indigenous and marginalized communities. What initiatives are you most proud of, and how do you see the role of education in shaping future leaders?
Well, again, let me give you a background. I did my undergraduate work at the University of Winnipeg back in the late 50s and 60s, so I was an alum of the university. And at the time, as a student, I was part of a group that sort of mobilized to ensure that what was then called United College would become a full university located in the downtown part of Winnipeg. The University of Manitoba, which is the big provincial university, was way out in the suburbs. But we felt very strongly that the university had an important role to play in the inner city. That it was a very different kind of community, different kinds of challenges. And so as a student, I kind of really I believed that the role of a university in the community is very essential in opening up doors, opportunities, giving everybody a chance, not just those who can afford to go, or just not middle class kids, but the kids children who don't have an opportunity, maybe for financial reasons, maybe for reasons of their own culture. And so when I retired from the government in 2000, from the Canadian government, I came actually out to BC for a couple of years just to work at UBC on an international think tank. But then I got an offer to go back to my sort of home university, University of Winnipeg, to become the president. And I drove all the way back from our home on Vancouver Island, and it was a really kind of one of those great times when you just have 3 days to think. I was listening to a lot of good jazz music along the way, but it made me think that here was an opportunity to realize how the university could become an anchor institution. And when I got back, when I took over the reins of the university, I spent a lot of time just knocking on doors. I went in the neighborhood and knocked on doors. This was a neighborhood that had a lot of poverty in it, had a lot of diversity in it. The indigenous populations maybe made up 30–40% of the students. And the thing that really disturbed me as I was talking to people was how they felt the university was aloof. It had distanced itself. It wasn't something that was part of the community. In fact, there were security guards that would keep people off the campus because they were afraid of them. The university didn't offer really any programs in the community itself. So it was that realization that the university, which had had the resources and the capacity to reach out, needed to develop. We established what we call a community learning agenda. First thing that we did is we took over a building on Ellis Avenue and turned it into an Indigenous center where young people could come and learn about computers, could learn Indigenous languages, could have powwows. It became their place. And as a result, they soon began to think that they belonged to the university. It wasn't something that was detached. It was something that they felt a part of. We then started introducing new programs. For example, our Dean of Science started offering major courses in math and physics for a group of grade 7s and 8s of some of the inner city junior high school. They would spend 5 weeks working at the university to learn it, and they came out there, and at the end we would graduate and give them a certificate. I would wear my academic robes and hand these out. But again, it gave people a sense of belonging. The third thing, which I think was, in a way, we also said, look, we have to open up the university for involvement. And one way was through sports, for example. That we had good volleyball and basketball teams, but these weren't sports that the inner city kids were playing. They played a little basketball, but we started with wrestling. We started with baseball. We started with taekwondo. In other words, we opened up our athletic facilities, and I signed to be interested in this. We signed an agreement, if you like, a charter, a community charter with 14 organizations from the inner city that guaranteed them 1/3 of the time and 1/3 of the space in our academic facilities to run programs. And so it opened up all of a sudden. The end result is that we had a much more diverse enrollment of students. And then we had to raise money. So I was able to recruit some serious business guys. And we started what we called the Opportunity Fund, which meant that every student who needed financial assistance would get it immediately. They didn't have to wait 3 months to apply for a fellowship. It was called the Opportunity Fund, and they could get up to $5,000 a year to come to university. And then we extended that program. We looked at kids who were growing up in foster homes. And one of the realities is that kids under foster care, when they became 18, they lost all the perks. They couldn't be in a foster home. They had nowhere to go. And they were ending up on the street. So we established a system where we gave tuition free for foster care kids and got the provincial on it to make sure they would pay room and board. The end result was that we were able to all of a sudden enroll a large number of young men and women, probably, I guess, 70% of them who were indigenous, to become a part of the university. And all of a sudden, it was a huge contribution to the university itself. They brought a new culture. They brought new understandings. They brought a diversity of views. It was really a kind of a leavening or sort of a discovery for the university itself. So that was the kind of initiatives that we took to make the university really part of the inner city community, where people trusted it, they felt at home in it, and they felt there was an opportunity to go. And so that's what we try to do. And I think probably one of the most moving experiences of my life was when I was about to retire as president after 10 years. A group of the indigenous organizations in Manitoba came together and made me an honorary pipe carrier in the Anishinaabe tribal group, which meant and there was a major ceremony, and Chris, in his introduction, and to put part of it, said I was giving the washi the nene peske. Well, the polite way of saying that was Thunderbird Man, but one of the elders leaned over to me and said it means hot air rises, which is a proper way of describing what I do. But it was to me a wonderful honor that they gave me that recognition that I had become part of the community, and it's led to a very strong commitment. I think I mentioned earlier, I've just finished writing a book that's going to be published in October. And one of the major cases I'm making, it's time for Canadians, you and all of us, to understand that Indigenous people have to be made a founding community in Canada. In 1867, we established French and English as the founding communities. The Indigenous were there even before them. It's time that they be honored, and therefore it will affect our legal system, affect the way we educate, affect the way we allocate resources. There will be a major change for this country to erase the huge error that was made by our foremothers, and also provide a real new revitalization of the country by recognizing a new human right that's been long ignored for over 100 years. So that's what I write about in this book. Does that give you an answer?
Thank you so much. That's very inspirational, especially for an educational leader like myself. Thank you so much, Dr. Axworthy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Awesome. All right. So I was actually talking to a Manitoba teacher yesterday who remembered you addressing the students and at the beginning of the year with your guiding principles and words to provide leadership and help everyone understand why you were gathered and what was the purpose. And I think it made a huge difference on her and all the students that you were working with. Well, now we're in for a treat. We're going to questions that are intercontinental. That's right. We're off to China now for our final question. And we have Nis, 在中国大连 from Dalian, China. Ni hao, Nis.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hello, Dr. Axworthy. I'm the fourth people who asked question today. Here is the question for you. In your view, what are the most pressing global changes today? And how can young people play a role in addressing these issues?
Well, that's a very big question, and thank you for it. Let me quote Shakespeare. Let me count the ways. We're at a time in the world where there's just a lot of broad-based global pressures, challenges, developments, many of them which are very dangerous and very risky. Let me just give you a short, summary of it. I think, to me, as somebody who was in public life for 30 or 40 years, one of the biggest dangers is the emergence of authoritarianism. That is, governments that don't recognize democracy, that they don't give people freedoms and rights, but they rule. It's a one-man, one-mouth cultish rule, usually by men, often, actually always by men, who begin to become overly powerful, and they begin to throw their weight around and begin to push out the right to speak freely, the right to have a newspaper that can write sort of critical commentary, the right to gather, to protest, to make yourself heard. And it's increasingly an alliance. And we see the dangers of it. Look what's happening with the Russian invasion in Ukraine. Here is a very big country run by an autocrat, an authoritarian leader who decided that he wanted to go to war to live up to some 19th century romantic vision of a greater Russia. As a result, hundreds of thousands of people are being killed. Innocent people are being killed. So that's one major issue. How do you start restoring some basic rules, the rule of law, putting restraints on political power, to making sure it's not used to destroy and ruin and violate. The one that, and these are not separate, they come at us just like the four horsemen of the apocalypse, is the increasing danger and risk of climate change that's going on. We've been talking about it now for 20 years. Governments have made agreements that they would try to restrict the emissions of fossil fuel. But in the meantime, we actually are emitting more fossil fuel than we did 10 years ago. And as a result, we're finding that the blanket of CO2 emissions in the air is accelerating our temperatures. And in every part of the world, you're now dealing with temperatures that are soaring into the 100 degrees, 130. It's having a huge impact on my own country of Canada. We now have 300 wildfires in our forests simply because of the heat. And so that climate change has a huge risk to people. People who live on the borders of the oceans are going to find their cities eroded. People who relied upon growing agriculture are going to find that there's no longer enough water to keep the agriculture going. And they and their families are going to starve. You're going to find huge tornadoes and cyclones and natural disasters destroying all kinds of community and again killing people. And so the climate change, and there is, let me say, less than enthusiastic or effective support. What can young people do? I think young people are actually leading the charge. I think of Greta Thunberg, the young woman from Sweden who stood up and said to the oil companies, you're destroying my country, you're destroying my world. Young people are protesting around the world. If I have any optimism right now, it's recognizing that in a country like Iran, which is authoritarian, where the mullahs, the upper priests controlled everything, and particularly were highly restrictive of women's rights. It was young women who went on the streets to protest, and it was young women who still oppose those governments. So I think around the world, young people, even the United States in the election, increasingly it's young people who are driving the agenda. They were tired of old guys running the country. So President Biden has left, and now you've got a much younger candidate coming in. So I think young people, let me give you a background. I grew up in the 1960s. I went to school at Princeton, which was part of the United States. And we had the civil rights protest, people on the streets demanding that proper rights be given to Black and colored people. We had the protests against the war in Vietnam. Young people led those protests. I was one of them. And I still think that so much of what change is required is going to have to come from a generation that I'm speaking to and that is part of this network. There's lots of us who would applaud and be grateful for that kind of leadership. So think about how you can become a global citizen and put aside all these kinds of appeals to grievance, to nationalism, to egocentricity, to saying that somehow your group is better than the other group. We're all humans. We're all equal. We all have to treat each other with respect. and we have to bond and build connections with each other, which is what this particular network does. So that's a very, again, short-term synopsis. We could spend a lot more time. Well, before I go, the other issue which I'm personally directly involved in, which we talked about earlier, is migration. There's now tens of millions of people are being forced out of their homes, being forced out of their communities because they can't survive. They can't grow crops. They're being attacked and violated by military groups, by militias. In other words, they have to move. And right now, too many countries in the world are closing the gates. They're not building bridges. They're raising bridges and they're closing the gates. And so the whole idea of how do we adapt and adjust to the right of people to find a place where they can be secure and where their kids can live safely. Those are the kind of big issues that you and your generation are going to have to deal with.
Thank you, Dr. Axworthy.
You're welcome.
Indeed, thank you. Miigwech, Dr. Axworthy. Well, I, for one, would love to continue this chat for the rest of the
Can't
day.
hear.
Oh, again.
It's okay. Try repeating one more time, Chris. You're cutting off a little bit. Try one more time.
Hello. Here we go.
Yeah.
So thank you, Miigwech, Dr. Axworthy. Well, I, for one, would love to continue this chat for the rest of the day, but we all know that good things must come to an end. However, we are hopeful that you might join us again sometime, perhaps introducing to us some of the remarkable people you have encountered in your journeys. By spending time with us today, you have opened our eyes to a wider world and hopefully to a greater understanding of what one person can, say, from North Battleford or Winnipeg, can accomplish in a single lifetime. And we also appreciate that you are passing on your learnings this fall in a book called Lloyd Axworthy, My Life in Politics. And it can be pre-ordered now, and we'll post it on our Facebook page.
Thank you for the promo, Chris.
You have shown us how important relationships and partnerships and engagement are. And you have helped us wrap our minds around the challenges we face and how we might face them and overcome them together. Along with Senator Loffreda, Mr. Dinis, Dr. Tam, your support for the young citizens of the world and belief in us conveys something something that we are truly appreciative of. So merci, benvenuto, benvenuti, or grazie, and miigwech. Thank you much.
God bless you, everyone. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Well done, Dr. Axworthy. Thank you. Thank you, Filipe, for being with us.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for the great work.
Bye-bye.
Forward, you too.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Always my pleasure.
Bye.
Yes, sir.